The Sioux Uprising of 1862 was decisively defeated, and its leaders were executed by the U.S. Army. But by 1864, the U.S. was still punishing Sioux people for the failed war against American settlers. The problem with the U.S. approach is that they generally lumped all the Sioux nations into one monolithic coordinated group. This means that hundreds, if not thousands, of people from the Dakota, Lakota, and Nakota nations who had nothing to do with the conflict suffered a lot of violence and hunger inflicted on them by American soldiers and settler militias. Killdeer Mountain, or Tachawakute, the place where they kill deer in the Nakota dialects, was a longtime hunting ground and gathering point in present-day North Dakota for various Lakota, Dakota, and Nakota bands. Among the inhabitants of this city of teepees and lodges was the famous Sitting Bull, who was there with his people, the Hunkpapa Lakota. A large gathering of approximately 5,000 or 6,000 native people, including civilians, happened to be at Killdeer Mountain when Brigadier General Alfred Sully and the 1st Minnesota Infantry Regiment attacked them. There were approximately 2,200 U.S. soldiers and 1,600 native warriors on the battlefield, making this one of the largest military engagements on the western frontier. The American soldiers slowly advanced toward the native city, and as they advanced, Sioux warriors rode out to skirmish with them at their flanks. Artillery salvos kept the native defenders from amassing in large numbers for most of their time on the battlefield. The North Dakota State Historical Society says about the event, "On July 28, 1864, a U.S. military force commanded by General Alfred Sully attacked several groups of the Dakota, Nakota, and Lakota Sioux nations camped at this location. Major Sioux leaders included Medicine Bear and Sitting Bull. Sully's force had been sent into Dakota Territory to punish those who had participated in Minnesota's Dakota conflict of 1862, as well as to develop routes to western gold fields. Many of the Sioux groups gathered at Killdeer Mountain had not participated in the Dakota conflict and had sought to make peace with the government. Then, at one point in the battle, when the Sioux warriors had amassed enough warriors for a frontal charge, Major Alfred Brackett rallied his Minnesota Volunteer Cavalry Battalion and led them in a countercharge against the advancing wave of Sioux warriors. During the countercharge, the renowned frontiersman Lieutenant George Northrup was killed in action. After a successful countercharge, the U.S. soldiers were within range to attack the native city with artillery. But by this time, it was getting dark outside. Instead of continuing the battle with infantry and cavalry when the home defenders would probably have the advantage in the dark, the soldiers unleashed an artillery barrage on the city. During this time, the Sioux decided to abandon the city, and they hastily packed up to flee the place where they kill deer. Says the NDSHS, Sully's force, equipped with several cannons, attacked and shelled the encampment, causing warriors as well as unarmed men, women, and children to flee into the Little Missouri Badlands. Native American oral tradition says that many of these people escaped through an opening at the top of Killdeer Mountain, known as the Medicine Hole. When Americans reached the city the next morning, they got to work burning down teepees and lodges, and soon the city was destroyed. Says the NDSHS, Sully estimated between 100 and 150 Sioux warriors were killed, but the exact number is unknown. His troops suffered 5 deaths. The Sioux lodges and all their winter supplies were destroyed by Sully's men, who then moved west across the Badlands to Fort Union. During the march, soldiers skirmished with many of the warriors they had faced at Killdeer Mountain. Because of the disparity in weapons technology between the U.S. Army, which had rifles and cannons, and the Sioux warriors, who had bows and arrows and some muskets, casualties were noticeably horribly lopsided. Between 5 and 10 Americans were killed and wounded, compared to between 30 and 150 natives killed. The number 30 probably represents fallen warriors, while the larger estimate accounts for native civilians killed by the soldiers that day. Despite the carnage that befell his people on July 28 and 29, 1864, Sitting Bull survived the battle. The following year, in July of 1865, he fought the U.S. Army again at the Battle of Fort Rice. This is a noteworthy occasion for Civil War scholars because some of the Federals that Sitting Bull fought against at Fort Rice were so-called galvanized Yankees from the 1st U.S. Volunteer Infantry Regiment. These galvanized Yankees were Confederate prisoners of war who were recruited to switch sides and fight for the Union on the western frontier. They often took the offer because fighting natives seemed much better than languishing in a POW camp and probably dying of disease. After the Battle of Killdeer Mountain, Sitting Bull led his people to fight the Americans for another 17 years before finally surrendering in the 1880s. Thank you for watching the Civil War Wild West Edition. If you haven't already done so, please hit like and subscribe as they do help out this channel. And remember, every additional minute of video that you watch will boost that video's algorithm so that you can help this get to other Civil War scholars just like you. Thank you.